How do we measure the quality of a cultural object? Of course, each of us individually has our own preferences of one film over another, one song or artist over another, one cuisine over another, one type of comedy or comedian over another. But cultural objects in the culture industry are also assessed not simply on an individual but a societal level. When we think of the different ways by which society considers films to be successful, three particular ways come to mind: critical, popular, and professional recognition. Critical recognition, as one might expect, comes from critics, those who act as cultural intermediaries between creators and the creations on the one hand and receivers on the other. They typically do so by writing evaluative reports specifically about cultural objects and sometimes their creators, typically in the form of critical reviews. For films, we might expect to see such reviews in media publications like the New York Times or the Hollywood Reporter, or, especially in the digital age, from online critics like those we find on websites like Rotten Tomatoes or Metacritic. In contrast to critical recognition, popular recognition comes not from people hired to write reviews but from everyday consumers, or in the case of film, audiences like us. Perhaps the most common measure of popular recognition is through commercial success. When it comes to films, box office revenue is one clear measure of commercial success, and it is even fairly easy to gauge such successes, for instance from the website Box Office Mojo, published by the Internet Movie Database, or IMDb. However, especially in the digital age, there are also other ways through which we, as online consumers and netizens, also express our approval or disapproval for various cultural objects. Perhaps the most common of which is through our online user reviews left on sites like IMDb or on film and movie streaming platforms like Netflix or Hulu. Professional recognition, as you may guess, comes from professionals, specifically professionals in the industry. Such recognition is typically conveyed in the form of awards given to people in the industry by their fellow peers. Thus, when it comes to the film industry, when directors, actors, cinematographers, and so on receive awards, such as they do at film award ceremonies like the Academy Awards, these winners are essentially being voted on by members of these institutions. In the case of the Academy Awards, it is the members of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, who consist of actors, cinematographers, directors, editors, producers, writers, and so on. Situating these various forms of recognition in the cultural diamond and the culture industry, professional recognition comes from fellow creators and co-producers. That means people who operate both within the technical and managerial subsystems. Popular recognition comes from the opposite end, from receivers themselves. And finally, critical recognition comes from critics operating within the institutional subsystem. In this lecture, we have distinguished between three forms of cultural recognition: critical recognition from critics in a certain industry, popular recognition from us as everyday consumers, and professional recognition from people working in the industry itself. We also talked about how these forms of recognition intersect with the cultural diamond and the production of culture approach. In this regard, professional recognition comes from both the technical and managerial subsystems of the culture industry and involves creators and co-producers. Popular recognition, on the other hand, operates at the level of receivers, who are at the tail end of the culture industry. And finally, critical recognition occurs in the institutional subsystem that operates between creators and their objects on the one hand and receivers on the other.